joining us, or if you're watching us later in some sort of on-demand media, whether you find that on our Facebook page, at the Gestalt IT YouTube page, maybe on LinkedIn. Hey, who knows? Stranger things have happened. Happy to have you here regardless. I got Tom Hollingsworth over here. We are pumped, excited, elated even to talk about the IT news of the week. I'm speaking for myself, Tom. I'm assuming you feel the same way as well.
Sure, why not?
Brimming with excitement, hope, and perhaps a bit of trepidation. Are you ready to get this show on the road here, Tom?
Let's get this party started.
All right. All right. Then let's play that music in three, two, one. Hello, all, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. I'm an editor at Gestalt IT. Joining me from across this great land of ours is the one, the only, the networking nerd himself, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rich. It's a happy day because we have officially entered the second half of 2020, which means I expect the rain of frogs to happen anytime soon.
We are halfway there, and indeed, we are living on a prayer. So let's get it started with a little something we like to call news or not. This is where maybe just too much news, or we're not sure if it's going to make the cut for a full discussion. But I want Tom's take on it and to find out how this qualifies as news. This first item here, certainly newsworthy. I want it from the IT perspective, though, and I want to set this up properly. We just received word this week that the U.S. is, in fact, issuing an executive order. The president issued an executive order. That's where the executive is. On June 22nd, suspending new visas, including H-1B visas granted for specialty fields. Technology Review note this may have a substantial impact on U.S. AI researchers as there's not enough domestic candidates. Currently, 60% of AI researchers in the U.S. receive their undergraduate degrees outside of the US. 35% of H-1B visa holders have an AI-related degree, just to give you some kind of scale of what kind of proportion those are. Canada, the UK, France, and Australia have no visa caps for AI workers. The Canadian government, in fact, has posted billboards in Silicon Valley encouraging those with visa problems to apply for work in Canada. So, Tom, from this AI perspective here, news or not?
News, and here's why. I'm going to take off my political hat, which looks an awful lot like the Mad Hatter's hat. Um, Here's all you need to know. We just proved over the last 5 months, 4 months, that you can do jobs from anywhere. We also know that people love to hire the lowest cost asset for a job, and now we don't have to bring them to the US. So the thought process was, oh, well, if we deny all H-1B visas or severely restrict them, then people in the US will hire local US workers to do these jobs. This is also known in the industry as crap, because what they're actually going to do is hire the people they were going to hire anyway in wherever they're from. And we all know that most H-1B visas come from India and China and parts of the East. They're going to be there doing the work. This is actually not going to help at all. But props to the US government for once again proving that they couldn't find their butt with both hands, a GPS, and a guide.
Yeah, and and I set this up from the enterprise perspective because certainly there is a substantial human cost in terms of people that either aren't going to have visas renewed or we're maybe making plans to come to the US and stuff like that. Certainly don't want to downplay that in any way, but definitely want your take on just that enterprise angle. So thank you, Tom. Next up, password manager 1Password introduced domain breach reports for 1Password teams and business customers. This uses information from Have I Been Pwned's password breach database to identify employee accounts that have been compromised, alert impacted users, and urge them to create new passwords. Hooking up with Have I Been Pwned for 1Password, news or not here, Tom?
It's news just because we realize now that all of this stuff is connected. They've been doing this for a while where they've been saying, hey, we noticed that this is actually a compromised credential. You need to stop using it. This should finally hammer home to people that you cannot reuse passwords everywhere. There's a little button, generate passwords. The safest password is the one you don't even know.
Are we surprised that we haven't seen this integrated more on a system level? Like, I understand, like, Have I Been Pwned? Maybe for whatever reason you don't, I don't even want to say don't want to trust it. It by all accounts, Troy Hunt, very reputable security researcher. Why aren't we seeing companies like Microsoft just go ahead, like, hey, plug in all your stuff? We'll let you, like, isn't that in any like company's best interest?
It's in every company's best interest, but they don't want to admit that this is a problem. Also, I'm sure that Troy probably would like some licensing for the database. And I'm not decrying the man, because God knows he's doing yeoman's work. So toss him a few bucks if you can, because that thing has saved my bacon on more than one occasion.
Yeah, definitely. Next up here, interesting from the US FCC, they have formally declared Huawei and ZTE as national security threats after tacitly calling them that for several years. This distinction now bars US telecom companies from using federal funds to buy equipment from them. The FCC had already banned the two companies from receiving money from the Universal Services Fund back in November. That's a pool of like $9 billion that telecoms can use to build out infrastructure, kind of for those last mile and rural area problems, and now says the challenge is getting the funding to replace existing telecom equipment in the wild. News or not here, Tom?
This is news, but just because this is another part of the gamesmanship that the US and China are currently playing. So here's ultimately what the problem boils down to in a short nutshell. They can be national security risks, and this can still be the wrong decision. I can't reliably say that ZTE and Huawei are not compromised by the Chinese government. That remains to be seen. But the US government just outright banning two telecom companies from doing business in the US is going to cause problems, because guess what? There's every possibility that the Chinese government can go, well, you know what? Cisco, Arista, Juniper can't do business in China now. Sorry.
Yeah, it's these knock-on effects, and like you said, it's a game of chess, and ZTE and Huawei. I mean, again, they're giant corporations. I don't feel bad for them, but they are definitely being used in this chess match to swing some hammers, and proxy trade wars are my favorite kind of wars. Next up here, Salesforce launched a beta of Salesforce Anywhere that brings together chat, alerts, comments, and video into its CRM suite in a unified view. The idea here is to allow you to get more done in Salesforce with less hopping between apps. At least that's how they're positioning it. Instead of like avoiding things like awkward screen sharing and allowing more seamless collaboration, just kind of letting you view the same screen and interact with it in the same app. Given how many organizations though live with their comms mostly already in Salesforce, I mean, Tom, we're no exception there. It feels like this maybe is a shot across the bow with something like Slack. News or not here, Tom?
This is absolutely Salesforce trying to get people to stay out of Slack. I don't know how well it's going to work, because just because you make the number one CRM app in the world does not mean you are good at all of the things. And I already spend enough time in Salesforce as it is. I don't want to live there. I mean, when I did this back in the day, I lived in Siebel, which was like, one of the original CRM apps back in 2002. And it was just sucking the will to live, and that was without chat functions and all this other stuff. So I don't know. Salesforce must obviously be feeling a little bit of a pinch from Slack and Teams. Well, mostly Slack, because they wouldn't have done this if they didn't. But I honestly don't know what they're thinking.
I feel like this is them making a product out of something that people were already trying to like hack away into doing anyway, and they're like, we might as well like charge a service, like
Yeah.
officially support this, let people use, because I'm sure there's all sorts of Salesforce integrations that you can have in Slack so that you get notifications in there, and why push people to another app when you can, I guess, roll it in as one. It's an interesting move. We will see if people loves them some CRM enough to keep using it. Next up here, the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, went into effect on January 1st, with the state offering a 6-month grace period before actually enforcing it. You still had to follow the law, they just wouldn't do anything about it. The disruption from the COVID-19 pandemic, many industry groups had been asking the state to extend that grace period, but California Attorney General Javier Becerra said that the law would start going into enforcement starting today. The law still requires consumers to submit privacy complaints, i.e., the government isn't going out looking for them, and the state will send 30-day warnings to companies to fix issues before starting to issue fines and other penalties. Tom, news or not?
This is news. CCPA has been on the horizon for, well, the last 9 months. I remember a lot of people talking about it at RSA this year. Ultimately, here's the thing. We're going to start seeing a lot more notifications of breaches. We're going to see a lot more lawsuits being filed to challenge this, because now there's teeth in it. We remember how bad GDPR was whenever it came out. And I say bad from the perspective of people doing dumb stuff they weren't supposed to. I can't wait for this, to be honest with you. I am super excited to finally have people holding these people, the company's feet to the fire about this. So bravo to the Attorney General for California for going, nope, you got to deal with it.
And finally, here on News or Not, the Linux Foundation-backed Confidential Computing Consortium announced a few new big-name members, including Facebook, NVIDIA, AMD, and Accenture. They joined the founding members that include Microsoft, ARM, Google, IBM, and Intel, Apple notably not among them, and will work on creating a standard to encrypt data while being processed in memory so that it can't be accessed by other parts of the system. The organization already has built an open source framework called the Open Enclave Software Development Kit and can be used to create trusted execution environments across computing environments. So it can be, cross-platform. Tom, news or no?
Hold on a minute. Confidential Computing Consortium. Facebook is now a member. 1 second. No. I don't know what they're thinking. Seriously, all joking aside, Facebook gets nothing from this other than to say that they've signed on to it. Because honestly, the truth be told, they don't want their communications end-to-end encrypted. You know why? Because they can't sell ads in them.
So I would argue that this is more about, if you look at some of the other players, specifically NVIDIA, Microsoft, Google. I didn't see Amazon in there. I think is the other big name, obviously, that would need to be in there. I think this is about, okay, Facebook is actually very open about they're opening the designs up for their data centers and stuff like that. They have an interest in having secure compute for themselves to
Oh yeah.
develop that. And so, like, I can totally see their motivation for themselves to have more secure, especially with all of the security problems, those kind of side channel attacks that have been, documented as working against, large data centers and stuff like that. So from that perspective, yes, they should not, just because they're on something called confidential, it does make me roll my eyes as well because it's Facebook. But I think it's interesting to see the names lined up in that consortium. So we will see if anything comes of that. Apple kind of going their own way with all of their secure enclave and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they need to be in that space yet.
Mm-mm.
All right, first up here in our discussion on Tuesday, Amazon officially launched, speaking of Amazon, their AWS Aeronautics and Satellite Solutions business unit, don't do the acronym, which will provide secure, flexible, scalable, and cost efficient cloud solutions to support government missions and companies advancing space around the world. This is Amazon's first foray into space, having launched Ground Station in 2018 to link cloud data centers with antenna in space, specifically like satellites, stuff like that. And Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos notably also heads Blue Origin for commercial spaceflight. This seems to be positioned as an edge computing use case, providing lower latency ML and AL processing to things like satellites versus sending that back down to an earthbound cloud data center. AWS says some of its initial customers plan to use it for real-time surveillance systems, which could improve the efficiency of far-flung shipping operations and improve weather detection capabilities, and not for anything vaguely unsettling. Tom, is space the final frontier for AWS?
I don't even know where to start to unpack this. This reminds me when I was a kid and G.I. Joe would ride dinosaurs to fight against Transformers and Strawberry Shortcake riding in a Tonka truck. Like, it's all these different things that I love that I'm trying to mash together. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So here's the thing. Jeff Bezos has an extremely large desire to want to do space because he's a bazillionaire with nothing better to do with his money. And yes, I'm almost positive that the Aeronautics and Satellite Solutions business unit, that was not an accident because Jeff Bezos is very much an aeronautics and satellite solutions person, a whole, if you
I can
will.
definitely see that. He seems to have an enthusiasm for that, yes.
So look at what Tesla's doing, or I'm sorry, SpaceX is doing with their CubeSats. They actually have a very compelling use case for this. Autonomous vehicles, uplinks, that whole mess. This is Jeff Bezos going, well, I can do it too, and trying to make this commercially viable because honestly, this works if Jeff Bezos can get other people to start paying for his rocket eroticism as opposed to other folks. And I just ultimately don't know where the value for this is going to be. Okay, I get it. If you're driving an autonomous car or you have some kind of weird like logistics network built out for driverless semi trucks, yeah, satellite, whole way. Satellite doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I'm going to run a crappy application in the cloud.
I also wonder, just on a like a physical level, notably, like every satellite rover, anything like that that's going into space always uses like super low spec components because they all have to be super hardened against all sorts of the nasty radiation that's out there once you get outside of the atmosphere. And so I wonder like what even capabilities they could theoretically, or they could not theoretically, that they are putting in this, given the need to harden those and what kind of life those would have. Obviously, those are all, things Amazon's going to has figured out and is going to price into their solutions. And I think it's notable that, clearly they're pushing this at a very high level. They're basically saying like governments, giant megacorps, please use the cloud that's above the clouds here, and we'll go ahead and do that. It does make me wonder though that if this, like, I will give Amazon a lot of credit, as mustache twirling as we can sometimes portray Jeff Bezos. AWS didn't happen by accident, right? Like
Yeah.
they saw a market, they saw that they could address that. Uh, if they can get an advantage here, I wonder if there are some other use cases that maybe we're just not seeing yet. Again, having that edge computing for satellites, maybe there are some use cases there that we're just not seeing or ready to see yet, or maybe they're just not there and people will make them up.
Yeah.
I do want to see Rainbow Bright on a dinosaur fighting GI Joes, though. That'd be cool. All right. Next up here, interesting announcement by Microsoft. They have a number of new initiatives to help displaced or unemployed workers and employers operating in this pandemic economy. They're using their LinkedIn economic graph that aggregates employment data and offering a new portal to show skill gaps in the employment market, showing what skills are in demand and paying the most. And what I think is most important, like that kind of information on a very broad level, maybe not so useful, but localizing that across 180 countries, not just even on a national level, but going a little bit more granular than that. This also includes a list of the 10 most in demand jobs. Microsoft is launching a free learning path feature to acquire skills for those jobs, and will keep those skill paths for free available through 2021. And Microsoft is lowering their certification exam cost from $100 to $15 through that same time. Given the unique reach and insight of LinkedIn, can Microsoft actually make a dent, in this jobs market here, Tom?
Hey Mav, do you have the name of that truck driving school? Truck Masters, I think it is. No, okay. Bravo to Microsoft for actually using their data to do something useful. Caveat. I remember living through the ITT Tech Institute commercials of, are
Oh
you
yeah.
dissatisfied with your career? Get a career in information technology. And suddenly you had the land rush of the world thinking that IT is easy and money, money, money. All right. Here's my problem with it. You've got people who are needing jobs and who are doing they have a skill set. And, the world needs ditch diggers too. You can't get people to sign up for things because let's be fair. Let's look at the skill graph. Let's figure out what this is. People are not going to look at the skill graph and go, that's a job I could do very easily and I'm really good at. You know what they're going to do? They're going to sort by highest salary and go, oh, I can be the CTO or a senior database administrator. What do you know about databases? Well, I saw Microsoft Access once on my school computer. Like they have to do a better job of matching people's skill sets and limiting the number of jobs that they can see, or giving them an option to say, well, you can get to this if you want to invest this much money and you want to do this much training and things like that. Because otherwise, they're going to wind up in the same boat that we are now, which is there are a whole bunch of mid to slightly lower tier jobs that need to be done and are available and need to be filled. And people are like, I don't want to do that. It doesn't pay $400,000 a year.
Yeah, and looking at those list of top 10 jobs, they had those. I was looking through them. They're kind of in, you know, two kind of different classes in terms of like highly skilled and in terms of clearly there is a large demand for these jobs, important jobs that organizations need to get done. But not necessarily ones that you like a skill up initiative is necessarily going to help. So you have things like the number one thing is software developer, not necessarily a skill you can get overnight. However, if you are in if you are someone that is, maybe you're a recent college graduate, you took at least some classes in college, like that could be something like you can get some benefit from that. But then there's other things like a sales representative, customer service specialist, digital marketing specialist. I actually think that last one is maybe the most interesting in terms of being able to like that feels like something we could you could do some training courses online and really kind of uh, be able to be productive in that position. But then you have more amorphous things like project manager, data analyst, which can mean a whole lot of things. I mean, it has data in the word, so it must be a hotness. Financial analyst, IT administrator. I don't know how much training you would need to be able to be proficient at that job at any kind of high level. And then there's something like a graphic designer where I feel like that's not. I don't know. Maybe that is something. Certainly the skills like manipulating Photoshop. The software you could learn. Being a designer feels like much more something that requires a little bit longer term plan. So an interesting a mix of positions there in that, which I probably speaks to the larger state of the economy and stuff like that. But interesting that Microsoft's at least trying.
Yeah.
All right, and finally here, another Salesforce related story. Usually we don't talk too much about Salesforce here, but researchers from Salesforce and the University of Virginia published a paper with a new way to mitigate gender bias in data sets used to train AI. Previous attempts to do this have tried to subtract components associated with gender in post processing after training. So after these AI models have already been built, but is prone to being reintroduced as the model gets used and effectively creates kind of new pathways as it's being used. The researchers instead use double hard debiasing, which transforms semantic and syntactic meanings of words and relationships with other words into a subspace. Follow along here. That can be used to find the dimension that encodes frequency information, distracting from those encoded genders. With this information, it can project away the gendered component. Effectively, they can kind of find out the relationship between the word and the gender, and like before any training is done, semantically kind of move those apart. Effectively, this helps to build the model without the bias from the ground up, rather than trying to direct traffic in an AI model that already has bias in it. Tom, we talked about organizations like GitHub and stuff like that being more conscious with the language they're using. Certainly when it comes to race and kind of the historic systems of oppression and stuff like that, which I think is a really important conversation to have. This has kind of been an ongoing conversation in AI. Kind of if you have bad data sets or biased data sets, you're going to end up with biased results. Um, a lot of techno babble there. I'm not going to lie, but definitely interesting work to see if we can kind of train those models with, I guess, less biased data overall.
Well, here's this is a thorny subject. They all are.
Hmm.
And I know that we got on our soapbox a couple of weeks ago about the whole relationship with the master branches and in Git and stuff like that. But let's take a step back here with this AI problem and let's think about this cognitively for a minute. AI models take data, build an algorithm, and then produce results based on data sets, right? That's basically what they do. We've talked at length about this, and I actually just got done writing a post for Aruba about this because they're getting heavily into AI, and they're talking about the data is more important than the algorithm, which is true. The algorithm is a hypothesis. The data is the data. So what they're basically doing is they're training their hypothesis to ignore parts of the data. Now, before you start burning down the comments section, I want you to stop and think about something. If the data supports that bias exists, should you change your algorithm to eliminate said bias? I don't have a good answer. Truthfully, I'd like there to be no bias at all. I would like everyone to be treated equally. I would like everyone to have a fair shot, and I would like there to be no implicit systemic bias in the whole thing. But going so far as to change the data to support that is problematic because it becomes an out of sight, out of mind thing. And I want you to rewind your clocks back to 1949 with an Orwell novel. What happens when we just pretend that nothing exists?
So I would two things here. One interesting note from the researchers themselves that says this doesn't eliminate the bias, and that the biggest component of this is the sociolinguistic background that language exists in. If that contains gendered language, it inevitably will at some point creep into any kind of model. Like this isn't something that they can completely remove any idea of gender or anything like from that data set. But in my mind, it is more akin to, I guess, what is the what is the intent of the algorithm, right? That this model is being used to train on. Like if you're looking for something that you're going to claim is unbiased when it comes some of this comes down to um, like if you're training an AI for reading comprehension or something like that, and you can do that in a way that isn't going to replicate as gendered as language. If like that's your intent, then this is a good way to do that, right? If it is to sound like, I don't know, like sound like again, it all comes down to intent, and to me, it is kind of like weighing survey responses, right? It's realizing that the data you are getting in maybe isn't represent. You know, you are not able to get either a representative or an ideal kind of data set, and so you're applying some kind of weights and pressures to that, so that it can actually, because that's the function that you want. You can do that.
So, and just for the sake of argument, Salesforce is at least acknowledging that there's an issue and they need to take a
Mhm.
look at it. And that's usually the first step. And that's actually one of the biggest problems we've had for years is get at least getting people to admit there's a problem that we need to look at. So bravo to Salesforce for doing that. But that doesn't mean that acknowledging that there's a problem means that it goes away. It's not like the check engine light on your car. Oh, hey, it's on. I'll just keep driving until it goes off. This is something that needs to be investigated. It needs to be researched, and there needs to actually be an outcome. And if the outcome is yes, there's problems, and we need to work on that from a perspective of a society or something like that, way to go. That at least you're acknowledging where the issue is. But if it's we'll just tweak these 3 settings and the problem goes away, I typically I get really nervous about the wave of magic wand solutions because that tends to create more problems down the road.
Yeah, and just kind of the final word on this is I completely agree with you that like acknowledging it and actually fixing a solution are two totally different things. I think it's an excellent point to kind of bring up. And but on the and to the other side of that, um, once we have kind of identified it, I do think it's important that as we increasingly trust these algorithms, to kind of be black boxes that we can put stuff in and and get magic results and stuff out, that we do have to start thinking about how we as imperfect beings are kind of that these are a reflection of us. They're a reflection of the people that create them. And so being conscious of that, and again, I don't think the researchers saying like this is the best way to do it, this is the only way to do it. Just kind of disentangling, kind of the semantics and and then the relationship of words that they have with gender, and kind of being able to tease them apart, I think is an interesting concept for AI.
Yeah.
All right, well, that just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're here every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, talking about the IT news of the week. Exciting stuff. And Tom, you're all about Gestalt IT. Where can people find, and what kind of stuff do you have coming out, and where can people find more of your great stuff?
Well, I just published a conversation last week about edge computing. I got another one coming up pretty soon, probably next week or the week after. It's going to be a security related topic. I think we're going to do end-to-end encryption. I've got some other great topics coming out, including an interview that I did with one of the founders of Viptela during Cisco Live. So that should be up. I'm hoping tomorrow if I can get all the writing done. But other than that, I think the biggest thing I want to tell everyone out there is if, one of the things that we always try to do here on the Rundown is we have a lot of stories related to AI. If you're a fan of that, you're going to want to stay tuned because Tech Field Day is going to have an AI field day coming up later this year in November. Head over to the website, techfieldday.com. Look for AI Field Day, and you can get a heads up about all the great information that'll be coming along your way later in the year.
Look at all this synergy, Tom, that we have. It's not just the colors of our polo shirts. It's the content of the show itself. And you can also check out Checksum. I just did a video kind of diving deeper into the whole possible spinoff of VMware by Dell that published this week. And then I'm going to be working on one later today, in fact. I'll be working on, not publishing it. That will be all about kind of the history of working from home and maybe some of the lessons we can learn from that. So check those out, youtube.com/Gestalt IT video, probably where you're watching this now. Like I said, we'll be back next week at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time talking about the IT news of the week. Until then, for myself, for Tom Hollingsworth, for all of us here in the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super